maybe the big story right now is the details of the Jauan Jennings contract have hit. He's got a base salary in 2024 of $1.055 million, prorated signing bonus of $1.242 million, and there's no prorated option bonus. When you look at some of the details of the contract, what jumps out to you? It reduces the 2024 cap hit with void years. When you look at the entirety of the fine print on his deal, what stands out?
To me, it's just the value. Last week, we were here on the show talking about Jauan Jennings and how there was some chatter about some teams being interested in him. The Pittsburgh Steelers, once again, tapping into the wide receiver market, looking at some Niners receivers. We've seen Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Jauan Jennings, all involved in that speculation. And I had said, look, I'm not sure after drafting Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing that a player like Jauan Jennings is going to be here in 2025 after he plays out the remainder of his deal on that RFA tender, which was less than $5 million, because I thought if I'm Jauan Jennings, I hit the open market, I can get that Kendrick Bourne type of deal. I'm an ascending player who's gotten better every year. I'm a great cultural fit, has that dog mentality. He plays with swagger, great blocker, clutch player who always seems to be in the right place at the right time. I really think his value on the open market, Larry, is $8 to $10 million. So when you're paying Jauan Jennings average annual value right around 5, it's a little bit more than that 4.9 on the RFA tender. But the fine print of the contract, I just talked about this on the show this morning. Base salary in 2024 of $1,025,000. It's 1.17. That's also the guaranteed money that he gets. And then the $1.2 million in prorated signing bonus. The per game roster bonus for him is really good. That's part of the reason why he can earn up to 15 plus million. That's $625,000. And then the cap number, totally affordable. 2.77 this year, and then 4.25 next year. So it's the value of the deal, the player that you're able to retain, his meaning for this Niners offense, and the fact that he's so widely respected across this entire organization.
What does it mean for Deebo? What does it mean for Ayuk? Is this like the handwriting's on the wall that this is it for Deebo? There's also some people speculating that maybe Deebo gets moved as soon as June 1st, which is tomorrow. Do you think Deebo gets moved after June 1st because of the advantageous cap situation, or do you think he's here all year? And what does the Jennings signing indicate about his future?
Right after the Super Bowl, I put together a graphic of all of the marquee players on the Niners roster, and the caption of the graphic was The Last Dance, a play on words for that legendary Michael Jordan documentary, which helped get us through COVID, which gave us some sports and some great things to talk about as content creators and sports talk show hosts. And I really firmly believe that this is going to be like the last dance for this core group of Niners players for 2024. And I'm going to continue to remain firm on that prediction that they run it back in 2024. You're going to see one of the deeper wide receiver cores in the entire NFL this year with Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Jauan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, and then the battle for that 5th and 6th wide receiver spot is going to be a really good training camp battle. And I think that next off season is when the Niners reassess. There is a complete possibility that the Niners do pay 2 wide receivers $25+ million. The Dolphins are now doing it with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. The Eagles are now doing it with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. The 49ers can do that as well. But it's going to take a big Deebo Samuel year and a bounce back year after 2 down years in 2022 and 2023 in order for that to happen. I think what the Niners have done here and what this Jauan Jennings deal means is they have themselves some roster security here. They draft Pearsall. They draft Cowing. You now know that Jauan Jennings on an affordable deal is going to be under team control for 2024 and 2025. That's at the very least. And that gives you the roster flexibility because if you want to move on from Deebo, you can do that. If you want to run it back, you can do that too. And I do think that ultimately Brandon Ayuk does re-sign with San Francisco. I don't think that they run the risk of having a fractured locker room with him playing on an expiring deal and being a dead duck awaiting and playing under that 5th-year option. I think they extend him, but the Jennings contract just gives you flexibility in that wide receiver room. The Niners run it back, and it's kind of that last dance, because I do think next offseason, whether it's Debo, Kittle, Juszczyk, Hargrave, one of these highly paid players, they're not with this team going into 2025.
One of the videos that I did a week ago, and I saw you did one as well this week, and kind of mentioned him, is Tristan Wirfs.
Yeah,
he's holding out in Tampa. A lot of people felt like Wirfs was the guy the Niners should have drafted the year they drafted Kinlaw.
yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly if Wirfs was off the board by that point. He might have gone off the board maybe right before. But what do you think? I mean, is Wirfs, you think, going to make it? Is he going to work it out in Tampa and everything's going to be hunky dory, or do you think Tampa moves him? And I that video, I started watching it down at the Niner complex, and I only got about 3/4 of the way through, and I didn't get to finish because it was one of your longer videos. What was your consensus, and what were the reactions from the fans on Wirfs? And were you suggesting maybe Ayuk in a deal for Wirfs, or were you looking at it strictly from a draft pick compensation going back to Tampa? And what do you think of the viability of that? Because in a lot of ways, man, Tristan Wirfs, the Niners need a Tristan Wirfs more than they need Brandon Ayuk. Well, really, I mean, they're fortified at wide receiver. They're really not at right tackle.
How I phrased that was, this is my dream trade target for the Niners among all players in the NFL, because of the need, the player, and the overall plan that you could have at your disposal if you were to trade for Tristan Wirfs. And what I meant by that was, you're weak at right tackle right now. So he has played right tackle. He's played left tackle. He could play right tackle for you for the foreseeable future. You sign him to that contract extension. And then once Trent Williams hangs it up, then he can move back to left tackle, and then you revisit what you do at that right tackle spot. And the consensus from the fans was something that you just referenced very quickly. Well, we should have just drafted him in the first place. And yeah, that's probably a bad draft miss, going with Jauan Jennings, who's not with this team any longer. You didn't even exercise his 5th-year option. Now he's playing with the Jets, and you didn't draft Tristan Wirfs. Unfortunately for this organization, outside of making the trade, which was a steal, a highway robbery, and then paying Trent Williams, they haven't really highly invested into the offensive line. They drafted Aaron Banks in the 2nd round. That has worked out pretty solid, because he's ended up being a good player for San Francisco, but who knows if he even gets a contract extension this offseason, because he's in the final year of his rookie deal. So that's kind of the route that I took. As for the compensation, that's pretty interesting. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in a spot where they paid Baker Mayfield. They made Antoine Winfield the highest paid DB ever. They gave another bag to Mike Evans. They've taken care of their homegrown players, yet
except for Godwin. They haven't taken care of Godwin.
Not Godwin yet, but at a position of importance for a young player, they have not taken care of Tristan Wirfs yet, and he might hold out. And if he does hold out, what's going to happen? Now, Antoine Winfield did play out the remainder of his contract. Tristan Wirfs clearly doesn't want to do that. He wants that new deal. The compensation, it could be a wide receiver on this Niners team, but the Buccaneers, unfortunately, are kind of good at that position, because you have Godwin and you have Chris Evans. For me, it would probably be draft compensation is what you would have to give up. And I think for a player of that pedigree, who's really, really good, who's been durable, who can play both sides of the line at both tackle spots, maybe 2 first-round picks. And are you willing to give up 2 first-round picks and then pay Tristan Wirfs? That's probably a little bit too steep for my asking, but that's why I kind of framed it as a dream trade scenario for me.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, he's a dream player. I'd rather go 1 and a 2 than 2 1s, especially after losing, 3 1s in the Lance situation. But But Wirfs, in a lot of ways, is the ideal guy. If you had Wirfs, he's your future at left tackle. He's your starter at right tackle. He checks a lot of boxes and would really be a foundation piece for this team going forward. So I'd be absolutely in favor of consummating a trade if he could bring him to San Francisco for any reasonable amount. I'm going to share the screen here because Chris Forster has an interesting quote that was interesting from the other day. Here's Forster down in Ninerland talking about kind of his philosophy on the draft and where to draft offensive linemen. Listen to this, and we'll talk about it in a sec.
Yeah, I don't know about that's for John and Kyle for the most part. My personal opinion, this is my personal opinion. If they ask me, invest in guys that touch the ball, guys that can touch the ball and score touchdowns. And then there's a range of guys, second, third, fourth round, fifth round even, that we will find starting offensive linemen in. At some point, can you draft? Yeah, you draft Trent Williams. You draft the pick of draft where you're getting a difference maker. But there's guys that can make difference that touch the ball well into second, third, fourth rounds, or second, third rounds at least, and definitely in the first round. That guy that touches the ball, it makes a huge difference in the game. The right guard makes a difference. We've talked about it before, but that's where we're able to find fourth and fifth round draft picks. And if they've been, you go find, it's how dominant is the difference between pick, 34 versus pick 54 in offensive line play. And that's what you're trying to balance all the time. So will we best available player, all those types of things? Definitely will. And were we possibly ready to draft guys higher in the draft? Yes. But if there's somebody that can touch the ball and make plays, in my opinion, you asked me, Chris, do you want him? I want the guy that touches the ball for me, because I think we can develop those players much more readily and have developed those players through the time, because we do have a specific things that we're looking for. We know what we're looking for through the course of time. That's the advantage of being together with Kyle for so long, that we kind of can pigeonhole these guys. Are we always right? Heck no, we're not always right. And nobody is on anything. So yeah, could you put 5 first rounders across the front? I don't know that we have to have success. And it hasn't been that case as far as running the football and protecting the quarterback. Do we have, yeah, we don't have 5 first rounders. So there's always going to be that. But the fact that you can throw a short pass to Debo, even though the right tackle is getting beat, it ends up being a 60-yard touchdown. So yeah, the right tackle blocks somebody, but if the guy gets tackled at 5 yards, you don't have the 60-yard touchdown. Boy, that right tackle did a great job. What's it matter if the guy touching the ball can't take it to the house? So there's the trade-off, and you're constantly playing that game.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, first of all, Chris can really talk. I mean, that was a lengthy cut, but this kind of goes beyond this regime. I mean, Bob McKittrick, the Niners did not draft offensive linemen very high. Harris Barton was a number 1 pick in the 80s, early 90s. Then you got Mike Iupati and Anthony Davis, who were first round picks in the same year. Other than that, the Niners, for the most part, don't use first round picks or even second round picks on linemen that often. They did in round 1, I think, for Joshua Garnett. That was a bust. They did in round 2 for Banks. He's been pretty good. What do you think? I mean, Philly, has obviously had a great offensive line. Lane Johnson was a first round pick. I don't remember if Kelsey was a first round pick or not.
He was
I would
a 6th
say
rounder.
Yeah, so he was a late guy.
But Landon Dickerson in the 2nd round.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? I mean, I kind of do agree. I'd go beyond that and say, you know what? What's really important is that you draft great players, whether it be offensive linemen, receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, any position. Just draft great players. Keep drafting great players regardless of position, and you'll be fine. Nobody is Indianapolis regretting the day they took Quentin Nelson? Probably not. But, how many Arizona Cardinals, I've watched the Cardinals under different regimes draft first round offensive linemen for 25, 30 years, and they've got one trip to the Super Bowl to show for it. So where are you on what he just said? Do you agree with that they ought to prioritize position players and guys who handle the football, skill position guys over O linemen?
I'm always of the belief that you go with the best player available. And that's why I kind of took issue with the Ricky Pearsall pick, is because at 31, I don't think that he was the best player available. I think it was a little bit of a reach. Now, so far, so good for him. I watched you and Dieter last night, and both of you very impressed with his professionalism, the refined route running. All of that is good. I also think that this is kind of going to come down to like a team-by-team basis, right? You can go Lane Johnson in the 1st round. You can go other offensive linemen in the 1st round. You can also get really good players in the 2nd round. Like Landon Dickerson was drafted in the 2nd round. Creed Humphrey might be the best center in football with the Kansas City Chiefs. He was taken in the 2nd round. For San Francisco, though, it's a little bit different. And that's why I talk about it from a team-by-team standpoint, because yeah, you take players or maybe prioritize players who have the ball in their hands, they're impact skill players, and they can score touchdowns, right? But the Niners have those guys right now. They have Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. They have their quarterback in Brock Purdy. They have some really good players on the defensive side that you might use first-round picks on, like a Nick Bosa, or a second-round pick on, like a Fred Warner. You got him in the third. You got Bosa in the first. My issue with San Francisco is that you have those skill players, yet you're still ignoring the offensive line, and you address it in the third round with Dominic Pooney. But the last couple of drafts, we've been saying the consensus, you need better right tackle play. You need better right tackle play. You can upgrade at center. You can upgrade at right guard. And they failed to do that. They didn't even draft an offensive lineman during the 2023 draft. I thought that was a big problem. They went with Jake Brendel, who's been a journeyman at right guard. They had issues there last year. Thankfully, John Feliciano able to step in. Colton McKivitz is a late rounder. And the Niners, they usually don't draft offensive tackles with shorter arms and a shorter wingspan. Colton McKivitz has that. So they went against their kind of philosophy in playing him at right tackle, and they're trying to get by with the affordability route, which I think has cost them in some of these big games. So I think you look at it at team by team basis. Like, yeah, you might want to take the playmaker who can score the touchdown. The Niners have those guys, though. And what do they need? Offensive lineman, a better right tackle, and they haven't drafted those players. And they got leapfrogged for Kingsley Suamataia and Roger Rosengarten by the Ravens and the Chiefs, and those are teams that you're kind of competing with. At 31, maybe there wasn't a good offensive tackle to take there, and I was totally okay with them not going offensive line. But in that second round, Jackson Powers-Johnson, Zach Frazier, a couple of players who we really liked. A little bit later, I like what the Bears did, Karan Amagaji, the right tackle out of Yale. So it's kind of a case-by-case, team-by-team basis for me.